numbers after this.
All right, guys,
Yeah.
let's go. All right, greetings and welcome to Conflict Radio. Today is April 1st, 2021, and today on the show we've got David Thibodeau with us. David is the owner of the website WacoSurvivors.com. He was at the Waco tragedy, and he's got some responses today to, I guess, this Vice video that came out. David, first off, how are you today?
Good, but this is Clive Doyle.
No, it's not.
April Fools. That's lame. That was so lame.
Oh, that's
I
funny
tried.
shit.
Yeah,
That's funny.
I was like, no, it's
Anyway.
not. I know who I'm talking to.
I was gonna say Gary Nesner and really blow your minds, but whatever. That would have been even funnier.
right,
Yeah,
so-
I can't thank you enough for all the time up at the
It's
Chucker
hard-
Playhouse.
It would be very hard for me to play an FBI agent.
We also have Jared Murphy with us tonight. Jared, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Hi.
You know,
Jared.
it's great to have you guys on the show, Jared. We'll get to my surprise in what we talked about just a little bit ago, but I wanted to talk to David. David, I woke up this morning and the first thing I saw was this Vice video on Waco, and of course I'm going to watch it. On episode 4, I interviewed you, and you and I had a discussion on Waco, and I saw this video. I was so angry watching this Vice video. I sent it to you right away. What do you think about it? And
Well,
so on, I suppose.
I woke up this morning totally oblivious, and it was nice. And then you sent me that video, and I watched it, and I was like, "Wow, okay." I was upset about it at first, but then I just had to relax a little and step back and say, that's been the FBI's stance for a very long time, and especially Byron Sage. Byron Sage has been him, and what's the other guy's name? There's another FBI agent that's often in the press when it comes to talking about Waco, Cliff Van Zandt. But Byron has been very vocal about everything and how he sees things. And, the problem is he's all the bullet points of the FBI. That's it. He's, it was once said about Byron Sage that he's such an FBI agent, all of his shirts probably have the FBI logo on them. So, this is a guy that's going to defend the agency no matter what, good or bad. And it's also a guy, that was very religious in his own way, apparently. So, anything outside of his religion, I think, is going to be very demonized. The whole problem that I've had with the FBI's outlook through this whole thing was they very much looked at David Koresh as a con man and the enemy instead of taking him as seriously at all as a gifted teacher. They didn't allow any of the religious scholars who were trying to deal with David to talk to David. They felt that they knew what was best for the situation, and they screwed it up. Well, the ATF screwed it up, and then the FBI taking over for the entire 51 days. There's a lot of intricacies we can get into, but it was almost like someone said once, it's too bad there wasn't a Stuart Wright said, it's too bad there wasn't a rule book the FBI could have followed, and he looked into it and said, oh, there is a rule book that they follow, and that's what to do in a crisis situation to save lives. And the FBI violated 11 of their own rules in their own rule book when it came to Waco. So in other words, if you want people to come out of a building in a crisis situation, you don't do these 11 things that they did.
yeah,
That blew my mind. That one little bit of information. By the way, all of Stuart Wright's writings are on my website, the Waco Survivors. All this, stuff that I'm going to say, I try to back up on the website with all the information we have collected over the years. But to get back to your point,
well, weren't you
everything
surprised?
that Byron says is something that Byron has said before. I was surprised that it was Vice.
Right?
Because I had quite a bit of respect for Vice as going in and getting the truth when ABC, NBC, CBS won't. It just seemed like they were a little more cutting edge. And, I just felt like I have more of an affinity to truth and Vice than Byron and the FBI. So the fact that they would be using him as a platform, it was just very surprising to me. I really thought that, if you will, that is the generation, the Vice generation is the generation that I've been trying to reach. And that's part of the reason I wrote my book is I was so disgusted with the way everything had been presented. The fact that my dad was a history teacher, a retired history teacher, and I grew up with history, being very important in my life. And so the fact that it was written by the victors in this sense, in the Waco sense, and how there was never really any national press given to any of the survivors. We were always, and if there was, the questions were very leading. So they didn't want to hear what we truly had to say about what had happened. Same thing with all the documentaries. All the documentaries, even the really good ones, at the ending is always the same, and there's no room for any other alternative way of looking at what happened on the last day. And that bothers me greatly because there's so much evidence to show that there absolutely could be another turn of events that occurred on April 19th.
Yeah. So I just want to give a shout out to everybody that's in our chat room right now. I see Dark Hour Paranormal is here. Alien Girl is here.
Woo!
Sup and Stuff is here. I guess there's quite a few people in here. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. It's hi Scott Everson, how you doing? He said 3 of the 4 agents killed were former Clinton bodyguards. Scott Iverson says.
Okay.
Now let's get into. I want to talk about what exactly Byron said in the Vice video because, to be honest with you, you think the FBI would kind of own up to this at this point, and it seems like this is a big propaganda video they just threw out here today, wouldn't you say?
Yes, absolutely. I think the majority of what they said has been that. But, what else are they going to do? I mean, and it sounds like I'm defending the FBI, which is crazy. But over the course of the last few years, history has really turned on the FBI and the way they have presented the Waco story, and that's mostly because of survivors' testimonies. And there's just a mountain of information that has never really been presented. Much of it has been presented, but it's always so one-sided. Now, if you were going to look at negatives on either side, you can do a documentary. I'd like to get somewhere in the middle, okay? I mean, listen, there were no perfect individuals on either side of this thing. Both sides, including David Koresh and the FBI, they were both very strong-willed in the way that they viewed in their worldview and how they were going to handle the situation. And, like I said recently, or someone had said, and I had re-quoted because it was so well said, is that it was like there were two trains on the same track headed toward each other, and neither one was backing down, and that's Waco. And it just seemed like if there had been a little more understanding in there that things could have gotten done. But every single time that David Koresh felt that he had a rapport with one or two of the negotiators, the tactical commanders would come in and do the exact opposite of what the negotiators had promised him and us. So when that happens daily over the course of 2, 3, 4 weeks, all trust breaks down. Neither side believes either side, and there's just nowhere to go there. Then you can't negotiate with that. You can't tell someone something and do the exact opposite and think that person is going to trust you. And that would very much be the perspective of the people inside the building.
Yeah, and he called the Branch Davidians a sect.
Well, he called us a cult.
Yeah, that you're a religious cult. This was the Branch Davidian sect. What would you say to that?
Well, cult is a word that is used to demonize people and groups of people. Mm-hmm. I kind of have a standard response to that. And that's that every single religion was considered a cult at one time. You don't think that Jesus walking around with 12 guys walking all through the Holy Land was considered very strange? That look at that weird rabbi there has all those people on the side of the mountain. Anything could be deemed a cult, including the American military. Now look at that. They shave your head. They break you down. They train you if you're going to jump out of a plane. When they tap you on the shoulder, you jump. You do that, they tap you on the shoulder like 100 times, and when you're finally in the air and they tap you on the shoulder, you're going to jump out of the plane. They recondition your mind. They recondition you. So, mind control and cult and all that. Cult is when you think of cult, you instantly put the word satanic in front of it. So where can you go there? The Baptists were a cult, the Mormons were a cult, all these religions that today are, huge, if you were, some even worldwide, at one point were considered very strange or odd or weird or cultish. That's one of the things that's to be very interesting about David, is it very much, he fell into the model of ancient Israel. There was usually a wise individual, a rabbi, and there were usually disciples of that rabbi who followed him around and got the wisdom from the rabbi. You could look at Confucius and Confucianism, and Confucius was a great individual who had much wisdom that people followed, and people wrote his words down in stone. He had scribes, he had people that were with him through the entire course of his life. So, it's just all in how you look at it. Yeah. For me personally, if they're going to demonize, of course they're going to demonize that, because that's where ABC, CBS, and NBC and all these news organizations, they want things to be as scandalous as possible, because you're going to stay on their channel, and you're going to listen to their report, and your ratings are going to be big. And the bottom line is the investors are going to make money, and people are going to make money. And let's not forget that every single magazine and news article and news agency you turn on the television are owned by 4 corporate companies. It used to be 5, now it's 4. Owns literally everything you see, read, or watch. That's pretty awesome power for just 4 companies to hold. And that's the American media for you. Like Noam Chomsky said, if you want to find out what's really happening in America, you have to read the London Times, the Israeli Times. You have to read the papers from Greece, papers from Iran, papers from China, You have to read the news from all over the world on any given article and put it together and find out a bigger world picture and a bigger world view, because every country is going to be guilty of propaganda and promoting their way of thinking. That's, this is age old. We just have it down to a science now, I think probably more than ever in the history of man.
Jared, do you have anything you want to jump in here with?
Oh, plenty. So for everyone out there, for all the research I've
Jared,
done,
do you mind?
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sorry. You had that question about the 4 people and the Clinton bodyguards. I want to address that real quick.
Oh, no, that was a listener. Who was that, Michael?
That's fine.
I think it was David M., but go ahead.
David M., yeah, go for it. Answer their question. That's sure.
Yeah, it's a short one, but I think it's important because there was someone named Linda Thompson who did a video called Waco the Big Lie, and it was. I considered Linda Thompson to have been an agent provocateur. She did this video that made much money. It went to the patriotic community all over the country, and that was one of the allegations, is that the 4 agents were the bodyguards of Bill Clinton, and that she also said that the tanks had flamethrowers on them and they were shooting flames into the building, which absolutely was not true. And if you see the unedited tape, you can see very clearly it's an optical illusion and the sunlight reflecting on pink insulation that's on the turret. But concerning and I did a lot of research into this because it was such an explosive allegation. And it turns out that the 4 agents, there were 4 agents in there. I don't know if they were the exact ones that died, but they were with Bill Clinton when he came through their state. I think it was Louisiana. I'm not sure. It's been many years. I have to look it up. And they were on his detail for like a week. So she made it sound like they were lifelong bodyguards and had insight to Bill Clinton. In reality, they were just agents doing a job, and they were on his detail, I think, for a week, maybe 2 tops. So I don't think there's enough there to say that those guys were killed by the cabal or anything. It just seems like that's quite a stretch to me.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess we'll go on to Jared, I suppose. What you got to ask?
Yeah. So I'll tell everybody that when this went down, this whole Waco thing, I was at a point where, as far as conspiracies go in reference to this, it wasn't on my radar. And the follow-up to it was not on my radar. So I am in a time warp. And so I have fresh questions for everyone listening. And for those who have already heard all of it, please forgive me. At the same time, here's what I was left with, the impression that there was a guy who had intermarried with sisters and daughters and mothers and had, incestuously inbred and then led a cult, and they got attacked, and then they fought back, and then in the end, some came out and some chose to perish. They started a fire, and at the end of the day, here we are. That's literally where my mind was on this whole Waco thing. And so for me, it's very fresh, and I'm a huge history fan, but this is one of those things where I had filed it. I had left the original news stories where they were. I went on with my bartending and managing at the time, and I had actually completed a book at the time that had nothing to do with history. And so for me,
was it how to pick up women at the bar?
It's so funny, man. When you're a bartender and you're a manager and you're behind the bar and you listen to what guys say and you listen to how women, vice versa, you see how women treat guys, you see how the game is played. And oh my gosh, I was so happy to be behind that bar. It was terrifying. Like, oh my gosh, you'd see guys where you're like, I'm kind of like that guy. Ooh, I kind of like that girl. I kind of look like that guy and I kind of like that girl. Let's see how that guy does. Oh no, he got totally shut down. I'm like, oh shit, I'm so glad I'm getting paid and I'm the cool bartender. And then I realized that I don't want to be on the other side of the bar. It's way too hard.
Yeah, I used to bartend. I get it.
Yeah, so I was at it then, and you know, I was fresh out of growing up severely Catholic, and so I did not trust the media in general. It was just an innate instinct. However, was it unusual, the idea of a Jim Jones, the idea of a guy who had a cult, who married a bunch of his kids, and you know, so I'm stuck in the paradigm still of this is a psycho guy who married his kids, married sisters, and then drove a bunch of people nuts. Now, how far away am I from the truth?
Well, pretty far, but
no, this is important because I'm blown away about. And here's the thing: to come full circle for everyone who's listened to me over the last year and a half, the reality is that the gray state is real. That what runs our government and what runs the world and the way it is. And I'm not opposed to the system. I'm just saying that I'm well aware that when you take the template that I write about and that I speak about, and then it only took 5 seconds. It actually took 3 lines of 4 sentences from Michael in a text for me to go, oh, wow, I can't believe Waco didn't go back on my radar. And it absolutely clicks in with, like, it did not go down the way that I thought. But for those that are maybe stuck where I am, can you dispel, like, who is David Koresh married to? How many kids did he have? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
And where was it at?
Well, the press did its job very well. And, through the course of the 51 days and then even after, using the term cult, using all these, the compound over and over again, the religious fanatics, David believed God talked to him. He had, kids. He was abusing children. He was beating children. It was actually told to Janet Reno. He was beating children. And there was absolutely no evidence to that whatsoever. They just told her that so they would get her to, okay, the gas attack, the gas plan, if you will. So, there's a lot of inaccuracies, but there's some accuracies as well. David Koresh believed that according to the scripture, if you were the teacher or the leader or whatnot, that you could have as many wives as you want, just like King Solomon or King David or any of the ancient kings of Israel. And so because the group lived in the scripture 100%, it's like going back in time and living 2,000 years ago. That was kind of the weird dichotomy of Waco is, I was raised by a very kind of liberal feminist mother. So I just was always interested in what the Bible actually said. And I met this group of people that knew what the Bible really said. They spent all their time studying it. They had all the cross references. When they opened their Bibles, they had the 1-inch margin where they had just cross-reference after cross-reference on every single page. So they had ripped the book apart and knew what it actually said, and I found that to be incredibly fascinating. And as I learned from them, the Bible came alive when David Koresh gave the study. So that being said, over the course of getting to know them over 2 weeks, into a month, into 2 months, into 6 months, you start to see the world differently. And basically, when I started to understand that a lot of the single women had kids, and I was started to wonder why these single women all seemed to be alone and who was the father of them. Is David just, a basically really cool preacher and took in single moms? I didn't know what the dichotomy was until later, when I started to realize scripturally what was happening there. I had gotten to know many of the women, and they were happy in their relationship. Many of them had children with David, and they were fine with it. And me being 21 at the time and being, a long-haired hippie that was in a band in Hollywood, just moving out here and accepting all of this, I had to say, well, who am I to say that that's wrong? Who am I to say that they're living their life? I was not a judgmental person at all. Okay. So it's like, to me, the social experiment of Waco was, that's their trip. They want to do it, whatever. That part didn't bother me, because the impression of how the FBI and the media made it out is there was a bunch of 12-year-old pregnant women running around, and that wasn't the case. What the truth is the youngest of the women that had a child with David was Michelle Jones. Now, Michelle, when I had met her, was 17 or 18. Serenity was 3. Michelle seemed like a very mature individual to me. I had known women in Hollywood that were my age, 21, 22, that acted very immature. And then meeting Michelle, she acted like a proper woman. She was very mature. She had this beautiful daughter who I had a connection with, and we hung out and talked quite a bit. And I didn't think of this person as a teenager or as a young person. I always felt that she was an equal. So the shocking thing for me was when I was writing the book, A Place Called Waco, my book about my experience, is I had to face the age that Michelle was when she had Serenity. And, that age was 14. She was 14 when she had Serenity. So what was shocking is seeing the number in black and white and then having to rectify the person that I knew as being that young when she had her child. So, in other words, I don't know what my reaction would have been had I been with a group then. I just don't know. I don't know. I don't think it would have gone down well. But the fact that I knew all these people and the women were happy in their relationship. This is where they wanted to be. They had studied the scripture. They had come here. They believed that there was a connection to God here. And that's universal. Everyone did. When David Koresh had his, what they call the upper room experience, if you know nothing about Waco, this will all be fascinating for you as you read books and start to learn about what happened there. But David had specific visions that he was given when he went to Israel, I think in 83. And that's when he went from being Vernon Howell to David Koresh. And he came back from Israel claiming that God had revealed the 7 seals to him. And the interesting thing about that to me, and see, the story really has to be told in its entirety to really kind of get it. And, when you talk to the older people that were there was this Vernon. He was a stutterer. He knew scripture pretty well. He was there studying with who they considered to be a prophet, someone named Lois Roden. Lois Roden was Ben Roden's wife. Ben Roden was the prophet before who had died. Lois took over, started teaching the Holy Spirit feminine. Now, to be a prophet at Mount Carmel, you had to have new light. You had to have something that the person prior who was considered to be a prophet hadn't taught yet. In Lois's case, that was the Holy Spirit feminine, or Proverbs 8 and 9. Literally the female version of God speaking to mankind, the wisdom of God, if you will, as it says in Proverbs. Very interesting stuff if you're into scripture. It really is quite fascinating. But where was I going with this? So that's what Lois taught. David wanted to know why, when he was Vernon, and he was living in Dallas, I think it was, or Houston, he wanted to know why there were no prophets anymore. And an old lady from his church said, "Oh, I hear there's a prophet in Waco." And so he went to Waco. He had to meet her right away, and he met Lois. And then they became, he followed Lois. He worked at Mount Carmel. He did whatever she said, and went to Israel. He married Rachel Jones. He went to Israel and then got this 7 seal vision. He came back, and all of a sudden he's teaching scripture. And he's teaching things off the foundation of Ellen G. White, Victor Houteff, Ben Roden, and Lois Roden, but then he took it 100 steps further and started showing where the seals were in Revelation and going back to all of the prophets of old. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Nahum, some of the minor prophets, some of the major prophets, the first 5 books of Moses, of course, and he would show you where the keys from Revelation tied in to the Old Testament. And that's where it got very interesting and fascinating. And the studies would sometimes, they would go on for 8 hours, 9, 10 hours, depending on the night, depending on the study. And, there's just some, it was very deep stuff. But the point is, when you are living in that world daily, it's the outside world becomes very adverse. It becomes adverse to everything that you're learning. In other words, you go out and you see a billboard of a half-naked woman on Hollywood Boulevard, and that's shocking where it wasn't shocking before. Now it becomes shocking because it's something that, for me, being out of the world, if you will, and learning scripture, it turned me into a different person. I saw things in a deeper way. I didn't go into a toy store, and I would see all the military toys, and I'd be like, oh, they're gearing our kids up to be soldiers. So in the event of the next war, they will be willing to jump into that role and go serve the country and die for the country if need be. You just start to see things very differently when you're looking at the truth, the reality of Scripture. So I think I probably got off point. The truth of the matter is that, it was quite shocking to read how young Michelle was. But
and was she the only one? Was she the only one that was that young, and everybody else was? Because I think it's important for people to understand. I think it's super important for people to understand how there was vilification to justify what they did. There's no justifying it. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hello? Oh, yeah. So there's no justifying what they did. The question is, was there anyone else that young?
As far as I know, the only other testimony was Carrie Jewell claimed that she was molested by David when she was 10. There were some doubts by her grandmother that it occurred. There was some timeline issue. I personally don't know. I tend to believe someone when they say they're abused. I don't tend to doubt them. So, I just don't know. I just don't know. But if her testimony is true, that's very shocking to me. And it's,
and
kind of not the
and there's
it's kind of a
right.
moment.
And I'm not advocating for anything other than there's consensual. There's definitely marriages that are under the age of 18. They're approved by parents. There's definitely relationships that defy standard convention, but they're within norms, within cultures. So the reality is that the issue isn't whether or not we would accept it or not. The issue is what was acceptable within this community, what was going on with the consent of the parents, and what was going on within, and again, nothing to do with 10-year-olds, of course, but as far as mature teens or whatever's going on with his relationships, the best of what you're observing is that it's consensual.
Yeah, but well, I don't know. I can't say. I personally don't think that a 14-year-old girl is capable of making that decision for herself at that point. I think a 14-year-old girl should be
Absolutely.
a 14-year-old girl. So,
I'm a dad. I'm a dad of a girl, and I would agree with you.
So it's, let me put it to you this way. I think that David probably should have gone to jail for his involvement with underage young girls that he had kids with. And the truth is, this is the truth. The state came in on 2 occasions, and they could not make their case, and they dropped their case. Now it's the state authorities that are supposed to look at things like sexual abuse of minors, not the federal government. The federal government came in, they used that to justify what they were doing, and they came in shooting. So there's no justification for that. And the kind of way I look at it is, let's say Michelle was 14 when she had Serenity. Well, you know what? That was still her daughter. That was her family. She was alive and happy, and now she is dead. And the truth of the matter is she died a horrible death by being gassed to death. The FBI
that's just terrible.
Pulled the tank up through the building into the concrete structure they were in and put so much CS gas in that concrete structure that not only could they not escape, they choked to death from the concrete, from the CS gas, and then chunks of concrete even fell in on some of the children.
And I want to throw this out there.
There's no justifying that. I don't care if David was the worst demon that you want to think he is or isn't. Our government gassed kids to death.
And when we get to I want to go vividly into that, just so you know, because it should have never gone where it did. It's insane what they did. I want to graphically go into how dysfunctional our government is and how they handle it. It's right down to our border currently. But sorry, go ahead, Michael.
I just want to throw out there that CS gas at the time of the Waco Siege was outlawed by the Geneva Convention. Is that not true, David?
Yeah, under the international rules of war, we can't use CS gas. So we couldn't use it if we went to war with somebody, but there was no law saying we couldn't use it against our own citizens.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We couldn't use it in the Iraqi war or the operation where they freed Kuwait. But boy, they got no problem using it on the children in Texas. And let me ask you this, David. Byron Sage was on the Vice video today, and he said they got every kid out. The only kids that were left in the building was David's kids. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so. A couple of David's children survived as well, but that's because their mothers had left early on, like a year or two before. There were two cases where two of Koresh's wives couldn't live in that situation or live under those rules, and they took their kids with them, and they survived. But those are the only cases. Correct.
All right. And I also want to touch base on the fact that he said that they raided the first day. The first day they raided the building. They raided the building because of, I guess, the reports of David Koresh with the young women. But they also raided the building because they heard that there were all these weapons inside. Now, I just want to throw out there and let everybody know that a lot of the people that were living at the branch at the house at the community there, weren't they involved in holding gun shows and had a lot of things that they sold at gun shows?
Well, yeah, that's the reason that there were so many firearms in the property, and many of them weren't there. They were actually at a gun show in Austin that day. Was David and I think it was Steve, a couple other of the younger guys had met someone named Henry McMahon at a gun show who was a licensed firearm dealer, and he started to show them the ropes. And they found out that, wow, if you have these 223 rounds, you can make a lot of money. They're all going to go up in value. So a lot of those guns and the firearms were bought as an investment and were sold at gun shows. They were bought and sold legally. He had all the yellow sheets on all the firearms, and actually invited when the firearms dealer who worked with David was raided by the ATF. He went and said he called David and said, the ATF are here. They're going through all my yellow sheets, and they're asking a lot of questions about you. What do you want me to do? And David said, well, put him on the phone, Henry. I'll talk to him. And Henry went to hand him the phone. He said, I got David on the phone. He wants to talk to you guys. And I think it was Sarabine. I think it was the leader of the ATF investigation, Chuck. I think Sarabine. I think he was the leader. He basically waved his head, hands above his head, as if to say no, and then did the cut, put the phone down thing, with his hand. So Henry had to hang up on David, and they didn't want it. What I'm trying to say is they didn't want to talk to David. They had a chance to go out to Mount Carmel. David would have showed them all the yellow sheets. He invited them out. And they didn't want that. They wanted the raid. They didn't want to have a reasonable solution to this.
Yeah. All right.
Was there any warning, not about the day of the raid, but about was something building to it that prior over the last few months prior to it happening? What do you think was what was leading to this? What do you think the real crux of it was?
Interesting question. There's a couple of things. Number one, the ATF was an organization that had been they'd been under fire for a while. The failure at Ruby Ridge and what they did to Randy Weaver's son Sammy, the marshal shot him, but then the FBI sniper Lonnie Horiuchi shot Vicky Weaver in the face while she held the door open for Kevin Harris and Randy Weaver, who was running from the shed to say goodbye to his dead son Sammy, who was they put his body in the shed. They're running to the house, and Lonnie Horiuchi just opens fire on him, wounding Kevin Harris, and then shoots Vicky Weaver in the face, ripping her jaw off. And if you talk to Sarah Weaver about that situation, she had to sit there through the course of that siege while her mother was laying on the kitchen floor in a pool of blood. And I have actually talked to Sarah Weaver about it. It's, how do that's what a thing to have to deal with. And then to hear
did she die?
And then
did she die right away?
Yeah.
Yes. But then the other thing that happened is the feds claim they did not know that she was dead, and they kept saying, "So, Vicky, what are you going to make for breakfast today?" They kept using Vicky's name to taunt them, and on the inside, they're going, "Why would they say that, knowing that they shot our mother? Well, how cruel of a person do you have to be to scream that into the house?" They did psych up stuff like that with these people all the time. Now, I will say the FBI claims that they did not know that Vicky was dead for a couple of days. They didn't realize it. That's what they say. But I think that Sarah Weaver disagrees with them.
Well, I think that's good for everybody to hear, because there is, on one hand, we have all, I watched the video today and they're like, we had 51 of the best top negotiators. You mean top lying sacks of shit that are there simultaneously, in quotes, negotiating. Meanwhile, people are getting shot in the face.
Well, yeah. That was another event I'm talking about, though. I'm talking about the Randy Weaver thing that happened 6 months before Waco.
Oh, prior. Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I brought it up to show.
Yeah, that was in Wyoming, I think.
Yeah. No, it was in Idaho. But the FBI had egg on their face from that. And the ATF, I should say, and a few other things that they had done. So there was talk of doing away with the agency and incorporating some of those agents into the FBI and some other organizations. And their budget was coming up, and they figured, Waco, if they would go in and save these kids and come out with a bunch of guns, that they could look like heroes. And, of course, they screwed the whole thing up from day one, from even the surveillance on. They screwed the whole thing up. And the fact that not only it just blows my mind. Everything that they had done wrong, all the lies that they told Congress, all the lies that they told the American public, the lies that they told their higher ups, they flat out lied about the early stages of the raid and what had happened to everybody. And there's many, many proven lies that are all on paper. These people still got their funding, and they got like an extra $10 million budget. So I can't remember what the exact number was, but they got their funding and then some after totally screwing up. And what I say when I'm giving talks about this thing, I say, what job can you totally screw up in every single aspect and lie to your boss and end up getting a raise and a promotion? That's the federal government for you. What kind of friggin' organization would allow that to be? You're supposed to get fired. I personally think people should have gone to jail for what they did and the lies that they told. If you as an American citizen told the kind of lies the ATF told to people, you would be in jail for perjury. You would be in jail for lying to the government. So how come, because they're under the protection of the government, they can lie and get away with it and get their pensions and get raises and promotions? What the hell was that all about? And that's again, that's Waco, and that's part of the frustration. For me, the frustration for the past 28 years has been, it's coming up on 28 years, by the way, the frustration is the fact that there's no justice from this. It's just a bunch of my friends are dead for no reason whatsoever. It all could have been avoided from the outset. And I still have to turn on Byron Sage and see him talk about how the FBI were victims here, and it was all David Koresh. David Koresh was responsible for everyone's death, for setting the fire, for all of it. And I'm just like, you know what? That's a nice soundbite, Byron, but if you look at the evidence and you put everything together from A to Z, that does not follow the testimony. That does not follow the witnesses. It doesn't follow the information that we have. It doesn't follow the evidence.
Yeah, I was a little surprised to see that today. I really was. I just thought if anything, the FBI and these people would just let a dead dog lie instead of reintroducing their bullshit theories again.
Well, this is in relation to the 6-part series coming out because 30 million people saw that on Netflix.
Yeah. So this is
it came out on Paramount Networks originally.
This is like their answer.
Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah, I expect a lot more too. I expect this to get.
Now
they had to wait a while because they if you were a soccer mom and you saw that series for the first time, you're like, what the hell did my government do? And I heard from thousands of people after watching the series how just jolted they were, how much they did not realize what the government did. And the truth is, this isn't the first time. The FBI has abused its power over and over and over through history.
Yeah.
All you got to do is
no kidding.
Look at the Black Panthers, look at anyone who speaks up for themselves. That's just, the Black Panther movement was because, black men in Oakland were sick of being shot down like dogs. And they decided, hey, we're going to defend ourselves.
All right.
And there's so many movements that have occurred over the course of American history, the Civil Rights Movement. And it just seems to me like our little friend there, J. Edgar Hoover's been on the wrong side of history many, many times. He just had so many secrets and so many people that no one could touch him.
Well, the FBI's, they're pretty dirty. I mean, we could see. I mean, just look at what they're still doing today. Jared, do you have any questions before we go into the actual tank battle, the raid? Because I want to get in. We're going to get into that, but I want to ask you if you have any questions for David before we move on to.
Yeah, I have one for sure. So leading into from irrelevant to the time that you guys met to the time that you here, what were you in the couple weeks leading up to it? Could you say you don't have to be quick about it, but where were you mentally, maybe spiritually, but where were you after? Like, I was also a long-haired music booking bartender manager.
Yeah.
I had the long hair, I had the whole thing going on, the same thing with you, man, right around the same time. And the question is, where were you at prior to this going down? And then before we talk, prior to the tank, where were you as that person leading up to and then to that point of suddenly a whole bunch of ATF outside your place? Where were you at mentally?
Good question, actually. Listen, I've always been, David, I've always been the same person. A drummer with a lot of passion who wanted to have a career in music. And, I took many steps. I went to music school. I took many avenues to try to make my dreams come true. I played with as many people as I could. I ended up meeting David at a time where I was just starting to see how, I worked for a bartender school, actually, for a period of time. And I would see all these. My office had 8x10s, headshots of all the people coming through the bartender school. And they would give me their headshots. I'd put them up on my wall. And I had probably hundreds of headshots surrounding inside my office. And I would just look at all those people. And not one of them made it. There's not one of them that I can look at today and say, oh, that person, I used to have their headshot. Now they're famous. So I had an interesting view into dreams, and what we call in Hollywood the boulevard of broken dreams. Everyone who is young should have a dream and they should follow it. Absolutely, your dreams can come true. but the odds are against you. So as long as you got a plan B, or you're willing to you don't want to live in it so much that once it's over, there's no place for you to go. You know what I mean? But you should definitely pursue that dream. So I was just always that person. I tried my best, and I never found my connection to make it and to have that career in music. I eventually just, I played in cover bands, and I made a living at it for a while, and I had a great time, and I get to play in front of audiences every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. That was good enough for me. But my point is, I've always been that person that I just am quizzical. I want to know. I want to know why we're here. I want to know why we have to die, and where the hell do we go afterwards? Is it just nothingness? Is it really that arbitrary? And the other thing is, I've always had really weird experiences happen to me that are unexplainable. I would be drunk and fall asleep with the candles on, and a voice would wake me up, and I would wake up and notice my curtain's on fire, that kind of thing. And it's like, there's no reason I should have gotten up, but something woke me up, and I can't explain what that is. I've had pin downs where I'm laying in bed, trying to fall asleep, just before sleep, wide awake, and pinned down by a spiritual force that doesn't let me up for 30 seconds, and then it lets me up, and then I can move. I can't even talk, all that. So that, what they call sleep paralysis, that's happened to me several times. And it happened to me just the first couple of days of going to Waco for the first time and being at Mount Carmel. That was the first time it happened to me, and it's happened to me several times since. My point is, here's the bottom line for me. I've just always believed that there's a God or a spiritual force or something. There's a meaning to this. We're not going through this arbitrarily. There's a meaning to this. And I've always believed that people, and I'll use the case of the mafia, I don't think that you can go out and kill someone, say 100,000 Hail Marys, and you're just saved. You're just forgiven. That never sat well with me. So I just always believed in some kind of universal justice. And I have to believe in a universal justice because, frankly, the anger that I have comes from 28 years of getting no justice when it comes to Waco, and seeing all the people that gas kids get raises and promotions and walk away just fine. They're enjoying their pensions with their families, going to exotic locations, right? And I've had to work 2-3 jobs my whole life. I don't have a problem with working hard. That's not the point. The point is they get rewarded for their mistakes while pointing the finger at me and other survivors and saying, people are evil, you killed a bunch of kids. And it's like, well, hold on. You guys came shooting at us, and then 51 days later, after lying about us consistently on a daily basis, decided to come in and gas the kids to death. You used pyrotechnic devices in the building. 7 or 8 pyrotechnic devices were found in the evidence locker, mislabeled as being silencers. They weren't silencers, they were pyrotechnic devices. And you, Mr. FBI agent, has said for many years there were no pyrotechnics used. The people inside set the fire. Well, you lied, because there were pyrotechnics used, and someone up high damn well knew it. They damn well knew that they used fucking pyrotechnic devices in that building, and then they lied to you, the American public, for years about it. So how dare you point the finger at me or Clive Doyle or any of the survivors and say they had a hand in setting the fire, and then never even give us a platform to talk about it? Thank God for podcasts. So that's where I'm at. It's 28 years of the shit.
All right.
So,
well,
yeah,
obviously, I have to believe in a higher judgmental source, power, if you will.
Well, Byron Sage in the video today said that the day the tanks rolled in, all of the windows and doors were barricaded, and the windows and were blocked up with hay bales and mattresses, and they used the tanks to make holes in the wall to let the people out. What would you say to that?
I would say that if you talk to any fire marshal, many, of course, we had that were going to testify on our behalf in our civil trial, that the judge would not allow to testify. So none of our fire marshals got to testify in our civil trial. That we're going to say that when they put the holes in the huge holes from the tanks going through the building. Now let's stop for a second. I want everyone to close their eyes and picture your front door. And picture what it might look like if a tank, a Bradley fighting vehicle, came through that front door. What would you do? Would you run back into the house? What would you feel if you were looking out of a gaping hole where your wall used to be? Okay? That's what they did over and over again in various sections of the building. Many fire marshals have said that the configuration of the holes on the second story, they used the boom to make holes. On the second story, on the side, right where the hallway begins, they made a giant hole. And the winds were something like, I'm going to get this wrong because my memory is going at my middle age, but I think the winds were something like 30, oh boy.
35 knots, I think they said today.
Yeah, 30, okay, there you go. Yeah, the winds were very high that day. So you got winds whipping through the building. Basically, it made it like a potbelly stove where you add oxygen to it, and the fire's going to burn harder, brighter, and quicker. So that's basically what they made Mount Carmel an oxygen flow system by putting the holes there. So if a fire was to be introduced to it, it would go up very rapidly. And not only that, but let's talk about the other point they don't like to mention, and that's the CS gas. They put something like 480-something ferret rounds into the building early on. They ran out of ferret rounds. They went to order more, and they didn't wait for any more to come in. What they did is they took barrels of CS gas. They connected it up to booms. The tanks would go in, make the holes in the second story, and through the holes that they were, as the tanks would go into the building, making the holes, they would be spraying the CS gas into the people. So that CS gas got over your clothing. It went over all the furniture. It went over all the walls. It covered everything. Now, if anyone out there wants to look at the fire, you can Google it. You can see it. The first 10 to 15 minutes of the fire, it's completely dark black smoke. You all notice that when you look, you'll notice it.
Yeah, it's
completely black smoke. It's a chemical fire, is what's happening. The CS gas is burning off. When CS gas burns off, by the way, it forms a oh boy, what is that? Cyanide poisoning. It turns into cyanide gas. That's one of the effects of CS gas burning. So you see this black smoke for about 15 minutes, and then, in contrast, you see that big explosion happen, right? That big explosion happens to be a propane tank. And it's interesting because when you see the propane tank go up, it's a clean, red fire that dissipates quickly. It's a big mushroom cloud, but it dissipates, and it's clean. You can tell the difference in the contrast of the clean burn to the chemical burn, and it's very plain if you're looking for it. So the CS gas burning off was an environmental hazard. It was totally destructive. It was a cyanide gas. It's really quite incredible. that gas that they used on the people, and oh my God, dude, just all it's incredulous. It's mind-blowing that can occur here. But, I love my country as much as the next patriot. I really do. But our drones have killed a lot of people. Our foreign policy has killed a lot. I could go on. I don't want to get into politics too much. So
yeah. All right. So let me ask you this. He also mentioned in the Vice video today that as the tanks were punching holes in the building, to let the children have routes to escape from, that they were receiving so much gunfire from the building at the time that the bullets were ricocheting off of the tanks, and it looked like the 4th of July out there with all the sparks flying.
Well, then how come there's no video evidence of that? If you see from 3 miles away, there's still cameras watching the tanks go in and out. I don't recall seeing any sparks. Do you? Does anyone?
No,
I challenge anyone.
And there's an infrared video of this that I've also seen. And, if there are ricochets off of tanks from gunfire, you're going to see that in the infrared.
Yes. And the other thing, excuse me. The other thing about that is Oh, the infrared. Boy, God, we can go on and on about the infrared. But before I do, I just want to say that, I'm trying to think of the best way I can describe this to you, because it's going to sound, I know, listen, when I saw the infrared video many years later, and I saw that there were bullets being fired from tank positions into Mount Carmel, I was shocked by it. And the reason I was shocked by it is because I didn't hear any gunshots all day. So, and that includes, I have to be honest, that includes during the fire. I did not hear gunshots during the fire. So it doesn't mean that it didn't happen at the back of the building, because the fire is incredibly loud. The tanks are still going into the building, scraping, and which was made this incredible noise. It's like your whole building's shaking, and these tanks are scraping floors, the gym floor, the gym, all the stuff that was in the gym was all the personal belongings of the people in there. That was our storage. And they're scraping all this stuff. And I can't describe how loud it was. It was an amazingly loud sound. But nonetheless, I had not heard any gunshots all day. And I remember at 10:30, this is what, to me, is so awesome about their story about claiming that their tanks were being shot at. I was there the whole morning. And I felt like, okay, my friends, as these tanks were coming in and not shooting at us, but they're coming in and spraying us with CS gas, nobody's shooting at the tanks. So number one, my 23-year-old thoughts were, oh, I'm glad that my friends are smart enough to realize that these little puny bullets that they could shoot from their guns aren't going to penetrate the armor of these tanks. And number two, they're not shooting at the tanks, so therefore they're not going to give the FBI an excuse to come in and shoot us and mow us down, because that's what I was afraid of. I was afraid of a frontal assault where agents would come in and start just shooting everyone that was a male. So that was my big fear. And then at 10:30, 11-ish, I had the radio playing, and it was on one of the stations, the local news stations. They had one of those reports where they cut it. They say a special report from the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas, is being tear gassed by the FBI. The FBI claims the siege is over and everyone's under arrest, and they're asking everyone to come out of the building. The FBI have received 80 to 200 gunshots against their CEVs. They did not call them tanks. They called them CEVs. Now remember, a tank wasn't a tank. It was a CEV. You didn't throw a flashbang grenade. A flashbang grenade, when you threw it, didn't explode. It performed a rapid expansion of gases. It was a compound. It was a called. These are all the demonization words that they used, the spin words I like to call them. So, my point is that when I heard that the FBI have received 80 to 200 gunshots, my heart sank in my chest. And I knew it was over. I knew that, I was hoping that we would still establish communications with them. The tanks had run over the phone cord. I was hoping the FBI would see we're not coming out and realize that they would have to let David finish the Seven Seal manuscript, as agreed to. And then, that would have to happen before we were to come out. And I was hoping they would see that we were serious about not coming out until that happened. And I was just naive enough to think that, that we could establish negotiations, which never happened. So the point is that when they said that, it was the only time in my life I experienced 100% hopelessness. I knew we were dead. I knew they were setting the American public up for a complete bloodbath, and we were all going to die. I knew that at that point. So I had no assumptions that I was coming out of this alive at that point. I had resigned myself to dying. Nobody wanted to exit through the holes because we thought we were going to be shot. What else do you do when you see a tank come through your front door? You don't walk out of the hole the tank went into. You retreat back into your building. That's what you do when a tank attacks you. You don't go out the fucking hole to where the tank is. Sorry about the swearing, by the way. I'll try to do that. But my point is, you just don't. And we all thought we were going to be shot coming out of that building. I was surprised. Seeing Jamie Castillo walk out of the building while the place is burning, and I could feel the flames next to the wall next to me, and I could hear my hair crackling, and I could hear the side of my face. My hair was starting to burn. I just figured a bullet would be better than burning today. They're going to gas us. Everyone get your masks. Everyone get your gas masks. They're going to start gassing us. And he went up and down the hallway, warning everyone to get their gas masks because they were going to start gassing us. And I think he was so mad he went down and threw the phone out. Anyway, it turns out that through the course of that last day, the tanks had run over the cord and severed it. But Steve saying that was just like, he was very loud. He was very vocal. He was running up and down the hall saying, get your gas mask. Not one time ever did he say, pour fuel. And I think Byron actually said that it was just a couple minutes after get your gas mask that he said pour fuel. That didn't happen. I heard Steve very clearly yelling for people to get their gas masks. Not once did he yell for anyone to pour fuel. That's absolutely ridiculous. So I don't know. There's a couple options here. Maybe he's mixing it up with something they claim happened later. They claim they have tapes of people saying pour the fuel. Now, when I was sitting there for the grand jury, they played a tape to me, and they gave me a piece of paper that had typed what they claimed the tape said. And they claimed the tape said, light the fire. And to me, I shut my eyes, I didn't look at the thing, and I had them play it 3 times. And to me, what the person on the tape was saying, and I could not make out the voice, was cut the power. Over and over, so they played it, cut the power. And I said, it sounds to me like he's saying cut the power. And the people in the grand jury went, like they didn't believe me, like I was the biggest liar ever. And I'm like, no, he's saying cut the power. He's not saying light the fire. And so that's just a point that it really pissed me off, because it's like, I know what I'm hearing. And I know that you've given me this piece of paper and you want me to hear what you've written, but I'm not going to hear what I've written, what's written. I'm going to hear what I'm hearing. And what I'm hearing is cut the power and not light the fire. And I never heard anywhere where it said pour the fuel. I guess they say, well, anyway, here's the whole context of the thing. And this is just another point that I'd make, that you're not going to get on any national television show. The FBI guys all claim that when they were saying pour the fuel, that was at 6 a.m. That early on, Steve or Dave or someone gave an order to pour fuel, and that people were pouring fuel all throughout the building, right? 6 a.m. Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you something. If David Koresh, who was in ultimate control of the situation, right, gave an order to pour fuel and light a fire at 6 a.m., why did the fire take 6 hours to start? That's it. That's my point. It's just like, you say that you heard this and you have this on tape at 6 a.m., but the fire didn't start at 6 a.m. The fire started after 12.
Yeah, like what were they gonna do? You were gonna drench the place in gasoline and then wait to set it on fire until you needed to? You know?
Doesn't make any sense.
No,
man.
it doesn't at all. Jared, you want to hop in here? You got any questions to ask?
Yeah. What was your role? What were you doing during this entire process? What were you doing inside the compound or the mount?
It's hard to say.
Sorry.
It's hard. I say it sometimes, dude. That's how good they are, and that's another point I like to make. Is David Koresh worked with people for years to get them to an understanding of the 7 seals, to get them to the point where they believe that we're all living under God's direct rule, that the words of God, the words of the Bible, were coming alive, and this is the time that the wave sheath, that we were part of that. It took the FBI 51 days, just 51 days of manipulating and using the media to get the end result that they wanted. And it's just like what you said, Jared. You believe that it was a bunch of religious fanatics that probably got what they deserved, and that was it. That was the end of the story.
Oh, I didn't even, just so you know, I didn't know that. I'm bartending, I'm managing music, and you hear the news, you listen to the news, and then it's one of those things where it was more here. I want everyone to be clear on this, is that this is how slippery and sneaky this universe is, depending on how awake you are, is that at the time, specifically, I want them to notice how quickly we can be fooled, is that I was aware of other cults. I was aware of other, like the Jim Jones thing was definitely fascinated me as a kid. And I was like, and again, I was raised Catholic. And so I hear a news story, particularly about the South, particularly about Texas, particularly about knowing my history, that there's this like uber zealous religious cult guy that's got a bunch of kids and he's got a bunch of wacky followers. It's like, I grew up Catholic. I don't doubt it at all. It must be real. I didn't think twice. I got to get to my bartending shift. Off I went. I didn't think anything else about it. Not a thing.
I get you. And that's what they wanted.
Right. And I want people to think about that, is that, you know, when you hear something, and it was like, I didn't want to revisit my Catholicism. I didn't want to revisit how people misinterpret or interpret the Bible. I didn't want to I wasn't in a place. And so I want people to realize that there's a lot of general manipulation in the media where depending on where you are in your personal life, you might decide that the current of all the news, you might say, well, I'm more interested in sports. I'm more interested in this, that, or the other. And I do think it's very important to try to keep an open mind and discern, to not shut down when you hear a story that, especially something like this, to not question, to not like listen to what you're hearing. There's 100-something people in here, and they're really on the get-go to get these people out of there. And it's like, why? What's going on? It should have been in my mind, and it wasn't.
No, exactly, and that's the point. That's why I continue to tell my story, as uncomfortable as it is. And there's a huge part of me, I just want to be left the hell alone at this point in my life. And I want to fade into obscurity. And that's just not going to happen.
Good luck with that, right?
Yeah, it's not going to happen. It's a, you know, I can't even post something on my Facebook about peace and love and respecting Asian Americans without getting a ton of controversy, and it blows my mind. The point is that there's plenty of Asian Americans that are probably more patriotic than you are, and yet there's still individuals spitting at them and telling them to go back to China. And it blows my mind that there's so many people that I know that don't think that that is happening. They're like, that's not happening. I'm like, yes, it is. Listen to the witnesses. Listen to the people that are being told to go back to China. Many of them have fought in wars for this country. The point is, you can't judge someone on their color, on their creed, on their race, or on their religion. You can't judge the sincerity of that person's character by what they look like. And that's exactly what's happening. And the fact that there's many people that don't see a racial problem in this country blows my mind. It blows my mind. I get it, because growing up in Maine, we didn't have racial issues. You know, there was one or two African-American families, right? Mostly white people in the north. That's how it is. But I moved to LA. I had many black friends. I had many Asian friends. It didn't matter. Mount Carmel was a total conglomerate of people from all over the world. And David often said, we here in Mount Carmel, we're people of light. We're not a color. And that's it. That's exactly what it was like. The kids grew up in that. In fact, if you talk to some of the kids that survived Heather Jones, for example, they didn't know what racism was growing up in Mount Carmel. They didn't learn it until they went to the school system within Waco after everything had burned to the ground. And all of a sudden, there's kids saying, what are you doing talking to them? You need to stay over here with your own kind. So they had to learn how the world really worked the rough way. And see, racism isn't overt now, it's subtle. But it's everywhere. And I got to be honest, I didn't see it most of my life growing up, so I just didn't think that it was a thing. And the point that the right will make is that the media is blowing it out of proportion. And there's probably an aspect that is true, because the media does blow everything out of proportion. But if one person is told to go back to China because of the way they look, then that's an evil, and that's wrong. If one person of any color here's the best way to say it. Nobody should be pulled over by a cop and fear they're going to be shot. Nobody should ever be pulled over for a common traffic violation and be scared that this could be their last moments on earth. That is ridiculous. And it's happening still. You know, who's the gentleman in Jared, are you in Minnesota? Who's
Yeah. I'm in the Twin Cities. I lived very close. I have friends that knew George Floyd personally. He played basketball on Lindale. And it's not about I don't know him, but the reality is that we're a very big small town. The big joke for St. Paul is it gets called St. Small, and out of the entire population of Minnesota, people have to understand that half of Minnesota's population lives in a 7-county metro area, which is really one giant suburb. I mean, they're all individual cities. They are actually very different, but the reality is that half of Minnesota's population lives very close together between Minneapolis and St. Paul. So it's quite an intense city area.
It's amazing. Yeah, and there's a lot of interesting things happen in that trial daily. I've been keeping up. Well, I mean, when I say keeping up, it's headlines. So you can only trust that so much.
Yeah.
Going into the whole media thing again, David, you gotta wonder what really happened in Minnesota. I mean, there's a lot going on there, with the trial and everything. That it's all. I mean, I guess I really can't talk about it. The Chad is writing about it here. Fish On in the chat room says that he's surprised to hear you talking like this. It was the left, not the right, who did that to you in Waco. What would you say to that?
Yeah, that is, it is surprising, and I get that a lot. And here's the deal with it, man. Listen, I have much respect for. Look, we're all American citizens. We're Americans. I hate the left and I hate the right. I hate the extremes on both sides, but I love them at the same time. I think that there should be a purple. But if you take red and you take blue and you mix the colors, it's purple, right? Let's have a purple party where we take the best of what the right has to say and the best of what the left has to say, and we kind of integrate it, all right? So, I'm for the Second Amendment, absolutely. But I'm also for helping the homeless and helping our veterans and building our infrastructure. And how about taking a little bit of the money to build B-2 bombers and putting that into the homeless problem, or putting that into helping our veterans, doing things for our becoming humanitarians, if you will. Yeah. Anyway, the right was the Republicans were the only people that would even listen to my story. The left wanted nothing to do with it, and I was shocked at that. So, what's my point? My point is I really hate both extremes. I hate them both equally, and I'll tell you why. Because it's all about love, man. It really is. You have to live in the other person's shoes. So you have to live in the Asian American or the African American or anyone who is having that fear of being pulled over, for example, or maybe serving in a war and being told to go back to China. Can you imagine what that would be like if that was you? That's it. It's just about loving your citizens and not being angry or using that hatred that politics seems to breed against people that you see in your everyday life.
Do you think that
you have to help those people and love those people? So that's it. It's not about the right or the left to me.
Yeah,
it's somewhere in the middle, and it's just like if your politics are making you look at someone with hatred, there's something wrong with your politics, man. And I don't care if you're extreme left wing or extreme right wing. If you're hating, there's a problem there. That's it. I don't know how to better say it. I really don't.
Well, you have to kind of admit that the media seems to be fanning the flames of this. It's almost like they want to keep the country divided. Divide and conquer, right? Isn't that?
And that's why it really bothers me that Americans are angry at each other. Because remember what I said about all of the media are controlled by 4 companies. It's corporate. Everything you read, see, or read, hear, or see are controlled by 4 companies. every bit of news that you get on your daily life controlled by 4 companies. So even if the extremes are separate, it all has an agenda. It all does, and it's so hard to figure out, man. It's hard for me. I read as much as I can every day to the point where I have a headache, and it's hard to figure out and put it all together. So I have to come back to it's simply being about just loving my fellow man and loving my fellow American. That's why I question my own political bias, because I was raised in a very liberal democratic setting. But I have seen so many problems with liberal Democrats that I have so many issues with it. But then again, I also have issues on the extreme other side. It's all about something in the middle to me. And it just comes down, if you feel hatred for your fellow man, there's a problem there. Like even with even that Byron Sage, okay? I'm dying. I want to say this is important. Byron Sage has been the one talking Fed head through this whole thing. And he's been on a show with me calling me a liar. All right? But I had to stop and think. I had to read Byron Sage's articles, and I had to say to myself, is this guy doing this maliciously? Is he trying to cover up, or does he really believe this? And after reading several articles that Byron Sage had done and been a part of, I have to say I disagree with many things that Byron Sage says. But I have to say I think he's sincere. And I think that he really believes in his country, and he really believes in his God. And he feels like he's right. Now, that being said, I think that there's some things that Byron Sage doesn't know. And I think there's some things and orders that happen that he just would never believe no matter what. Because, as it was said about Byron once, he's the type of federal agent that has FBI on every shirt that he owns in his closet. He's an FBI guy. He is, through and through. So I don't think he's ever going to change, I actually, this is weird. This is really weird, but I feel bad for Byron. That's it. I mean, there's even a part of me that can respect his 50 years in law enforcement. I don't think he's purposely telling lies. I think he believes what he says, but I think that he hasn't either been privy or given all the information.
Right. Well, he's in this Vice video today. Basically, I guess nine people ran out of the building that day, ran out from the fire, and he was giving crap like not one of you grabbed a kid, but one of you grabbed a dog.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because what he doesn't tell you in making that very powerful soundbite statement is the fact that when the tanks went through the building, when they went through the front door, they destroyed everything and they blocked off passage down to where the concrete structure was, where the women and children were put under wet blankets to try to escape the CS gas. He didn't tell you that when the tank went through that other area of the building, if you notice the path the tank takes, it goes all the way through the building to the concrete structure. That's probably about 10 yards where the tank, and I'm estimating, but there's several yards the tank goes through the building to get to the concrete structure to put a massive amount of CS gas into that structure. Now, where the hell are the kids supposed to go? Where are the mothers supposed to go if they're under wet blankets in that concrete structure? They expected them to be gassed and come out of the concrete structure, and then what? Go to the back of the building, where for sure on infrared we have over 68 different automatic weapon fire being shot in the back of the building. I'm sorry. Listen, I didn't put the damn FBI FLIR tape camera in that plane. The FBI did. So they're denying their own FLIR tape and saying it's sunlight reflections. That's BS, dude. There's no way that's sunlight reflections. Those 68 fully automatic weapon fire bursts that you see are fully automatic weapon fire bursts. Someone is shooting in the back of the building. You can call it sunlight reflections all you want, but how on a FLIR, something that is specifically, scientifically made to show heat signatures How is that a sunlight reflection? How can the reflection of the sun be a heat signature? I don't think scientifically that it can. It's not sunlight reflections, my friends. It's fully automatic weapons fire. And if you read the autopsy reports, it makes sense because several of the autopsy reports showed people had bullet wounds in the center of their head and the center of their chest. And guess what? That's not how you kill yourself. Even the people on the ground in the coroner's office made public statements where they felt that this was a homicide scene and not a suicide scene. So there you go. What else can you say, man? It's how do you bring kids out of a building when, number one, you can't get to them because the tanks have blocked off any passage and you're shooting at them at the back of the building?
Did you try to get to them?
Yes, absolutely. I tried to get to them. I went. I've told the story several times. It's in my book. It's what happened.
No, I know. I know.
It's like I said, I'm drinking a little Jack here. I'm having fun. I'm having a good time here having this conversation, which usually makes me very angry. So it's working out very well. So it's my true serum, okay?
All right.
So anyway, listen. I'm at the back of the building. I'm in the cafeteria area the entire day. I heard the same thing that Derek Lovelock heard and Clive Doyle heard. Someone yelled from the upstairs on the second story, "There's a fire. There's a fire up here. There's a fire." When I heard that, I went to behind the stage. There was a little hallway area. That's the area where many of us came out of. We came out of a hole that the tank had made in that hallway. But behind the hallway, there was a ladder that led up to the second story, which is where David Koresh's bedroom was. And then there was a catwalk that led over the chapel area, over the rafters. And if you went to the catwalk from where the Koresh's room was, that took you to the second story hallway. So as soon as I heard there was a fire, that was the first thing I wanted to get to Serenity and make sure that she was getting to the underground bus, because Koresh had buried an underground bus as a tornado shelter. And we were digging because so many people were coming to Mount Carmel. David had requested the guys start building a big tornado shelter at the back of the building, and that's what they were working on. They had dug out this huge hole, and we were making an underground structure where people could go and be safe from a tornado or whatever. And that led to where the underground bus was. So my understanding was that everyone was going to go to the underground bus. And I did not know they were even in the concrete structure until much later, but I knew I had to get to that area. So I went up the steps. I went through the dog walk, and there was, right when I get to the second story entranceway, there was there was a blanket. I forgot how to speak English. There was a blanket over the door, okay, because the doorway hadn't been built. A door hadn't been put on it. So I opened the blanket, and at that point, I had to physically move back 2 feet because a black cloud came in at me. And then as I let the cloud dissipate, and I went to move into the hallway, and a wall of flame shot down the hallway in front of me. So basically, I just heard this incredibly loud sound. It was a fire. It was like whoosh, and it went all the way down the hall in front of me. The entire hallway was engulfed, and I couldn't get in. I would have burned to death trying to get in there, and I couldn't. Well, downstairs early on, after the tanks had gone through, there was so much debris. You couldn't use the downstairs hallway to get to the cafeteria. So the cafeteria was completely shut off from the chapel area at that point. And that was it. There was no getting there. At that point, I couldn't get to the children no matter what without burning to death. Yeah. So I went back downstairs. I went back into the hallway where everyone had gathered at that point. And, we're just looking at the hole, and it's just like, well, if we go out, we're going to be shot. So we all waited as long as we could. And when people started going out, they started going out because the flames just got too hot. I don't know what anyone else was thinking. 4 people came out of the area I did. It was myself, Derek Lovelock, Jamie Casillo, and Clive Doyle came up behind me. And I didn't think anyone could get out behind me because my hair was crackling at that point. It was getting to be too late. So I turned around. As I got out, I was very discombobulated because I went from being in a darker area, being gassed, to there's the sunlight. It was very bright, and I almost went the wrong way. I had to see where the Red Cross sign was and take the right and head toward the Red Cross sign that was at the end of the property. And before I did, I turned around and I saw Wayne Martin, and I'll never forget this as long as I live. But I saw Wayne Martin, and the smoke was enveloping him. And he took his gas mask off because it just didn't matter at that point. And as the smoke was enveloping him, I saw him put his back against the wall, and he slid down the wall into a crouched position. And by the time he was at the bottom of the wall in the crouched position, the smoke had totally engulfed him, and I couldn't see him anymore. And I looked to where the hole was, and at that point, everything went into tunnel vision. And it very much became, it's like if you're watching a movie and the main character is looking at something, and then the camera pans to the right, and then the camera pans back. That's exactly what my tunnel vision looked like. It became very surreal. It's like I went out the hole, the camera, myself panned to the Red Cross sign at the back of the property. I was hearing Byron Sage's voice saying, "The siege is over. Go to the Red Cross sign. If you have do not point a gun at us or we'll shoot you." That kind of thing. I can't remember exactly what he said.
Yeah.
But I started to walk to that Red Cross sign, and I turned around and saw Clive come out. Clive was patting his arms down, so his arms were on fire. And I got halfway between the Red Cross sign and the building, and when I was about halfway, I turned around, and I saw the building totally engulfed, and then I saw that explosion happen. And that was the propane tank going off. And when I saw that happen, that very clean big red fireball, I could, from probably about 50 yards away, I could feel the heat from it. And it was just, it went off, and I could feel the heat, and it was just total disbelief. And then my camera face, if you will, my camera body panned back to the Red Cross line, then I just kept walking. It was, it's just one of those experiences that you never forget. And if you were in war, you probably would never talk about it. But because my father is a history teacher, because history is so close to me, and because no one... Listen, man, I just can't have the victors win. I just can't have the FBI's word be the final word, because it's not entirely true. It's not entirely a lie either. I mean, there's things that they say that are true, but there's many things they say that are embellished, and that's it. There's many sides to this story, and my side is one of them. And that's it.
Okay, and Byron said in the video, and I'm going to quote him here, they elected to stay in there under David's direction. So he's making it sound like you guys stayed in there because you had to. Not only during the fire, but during the entire siege. Were you ever directed or ordered to stay in the building, or could you have just left at any time?
I could have left at any time. Some people did. Many people did. Many people made that decision for themselves. Some people David asked to leave, and they didn't want to leave. Most people did not want to be without the group. I mean, if you were there, if you didn't leave years ago, and you were there, you were pretty much in. I was new to the thing. I had known the group for 2 years, and I had been at Mount Carmel for a year before all this happened. So, that's the newbie. I mean, I wasn't a holy roller, but I was convicted. I believe that there was some amazing insights to this book that I didn't even realize could be true. And all of a sudden, David could make the book come alive, the scripture. He made it come alive. When you had to study with David, you just saw things you had never seen before. You could read the same chapter, the same prophet, that you can have read that for yourself and not gotten any of it. And David just could make perfect sense of it to the point where you saw what it was saying. It didn't even feel like it was an interpretation. It felt like, wow, that's what this guy's saying. That is exactly what the meaning is. And that's what was so powerful about it. David gave a study like he lived it. He didn't give a study like he learned it and was reciting it. He gave a study like he had lived it, and that was the difference. He was 100% man. He wasn't a con man. Now, some people have said that he is delusional, and I'm going to say, from a scientific standpoint and from a psychological standpoint, that might be true. But he also just, like I said, man, when he gave a study, he just knew it. He just knew it. He gave the study like he had lived it. And that is something that I can't impart to people. It's something you had to experience for yourself.
Yeah. All right.
It makes it hard. I would love to be like one of those people that was in a group where I could say, okay, this guy was just way off. Everything is BS. And, I was deceived. Honestly, that would be the best thing that could happen to my life. Because then I could just put it all up and say, okay, whatever, I learned. But the truth is, I'm a seeker, and I'm never going to stop seeking. I don't think I would ever follow anyone, but I'm definitely never going to stop seeking. I want to know where we're headed. I'm interested in afterlife experiences. I'm interested in anything I can learn that connects me with the world to come. And I don't know why, but it's not gone away, and it's never going to go away. So I look at my experiences as gold. And I say this often, and I guess this is how I could end it for me, unless you have more questions. My experience is something I would not wish on my worst enemy, but I also would not give it up for all the Bitcoin in the world. I would not give up my experience and what I've been through for any amount of money. That is the gold of my life, was what I had been through at Waco.
Yeah. Keekin says, why would they do this? Something is missing. What would you say to him?
Oh boy, man, he just opened up a whole Pandora's box, didn't he? I'm probably not going to go where he thinks I'm going to go, but this is where I'm going to go with that, because that's a very interesting statement to me. I'm going to try to simplify this spiritually. Many people believe that David was a con man, but many people knew and believe that he wasn't, that he was sincere, and that he actually had a real message. Now, that's including a lot of the American religious scholars that I deal with quite often. I would say Tabor, Phil Arnold, there's Kathy Wessinger. I talk to a lot of these scholars. And, the one thing they say is, David had a real scriptural message. It wasn't like I hate to say the word, even Jim Jones, or someone who just claimed divinity and everyone believed it, or even you could say a Manson who used drugs to show that he had some kind of touch with whatever the hell he had, which was, which could be seen as a stretch. My point is that David actually had scripture behind him. He had a real message. Now, I'm not here to proselyte to anyone. I'm just saying that that's the difference to me, is he really was able to show the scripture. So that's the depth of it. To me, the people of God, the people that, okay, let's just say it this way, the people that really believed God, that really believed that they were there, believed in God 100%, to the point they were willing to put their lives on the line. Many people died at Mount Carmel, and they didn't die for David Koresh. That's what the FBI wants you to believe. They died for God. They were true martyrs that died for their true beliefs in the scripture. To me, that's the most honorable death anyone could ever undertake, period. They believed 100% that God was behind this message, and that, just as it says in many of the minor and major prophets, that message will be attacked by powers that be. We called it the King of the North. You could call it the Spirit of Babylon. You could call it whatever, there's many scriptural terms, but the point is that the Koresh had a real message. and then it was fought against. So the ultimate extreme where we saw the thing that I like to talk about when I give talks is that the government appeared to have the ultimate spirit of pride and arrogancy. They did that with the ATF guys. When the ATF guys were walking away from Mount Carmel, they went up to the camera guy who was filming everything, and they pushed the camera guy down when he was filming Bill Buford being brought out on the hood of the truck. They threw him down to the ground, and they roughed him up. And he said, "I'm here. You guys invited me here. I'm here for you, and you're roughing me up." That was the point. They didn't play that in court, by the way. They cut that part. So the jury never got to see that part of the tape, which is very interesting to me. The point is, whenever the government acted, they were just arrogant. We had guys on the tanks mooning us and giving us the finger. It's like they played into the scriptural role so perfectly. They don't even realize it. That's what's amazing to me. They don't even Byron, who is a very religious person, apparently. I think he's a Methodist, but I'm not 100% on that. But Byron has some very deep-seated religious beliefs. But he doesn't see that the power, the force of the world, the force of America, fought against people that were true believers in God and true believers in the Bible, and they wiped them from the face of the earth. Now, let's say they were even deceived by David. They're still true believers, and you're going to wipe them from the face of the earth as opposed to listening to what they have to say. Yeah. That's pretty heavy. That's how I look at it. And that's probably one of the better ways I've ever expressed it. But I look at it I look at it not very black and white, but very, very good and evil, very those terms. And in this case, the American forces aren't the good guys. That's it. It's like Koresh had a message. And he was wiped, just as he said, he would be wiped out for it. He was wiped out for it.
Now, just so everybody knows, we are going to be having Livingston Fagan on, and he's going to explain to us exactly what David Koresh's teachings were. He's going to sit down and do a show with us, and we're going to go through the seals, and we're going to go through the signs, and Livingston says that Waco was the lighting of the fuse for the end of days, and we're going to discuss that. What do you think of Livingston?
That's fantastic. I'm so glad you're going to have him on to talk about the real things. Livingston is the kind of guy, he's just very, very deep, and sometimes you need scuba gear to really figure out what's being said there, because he is, definitely a scholar. He was an individual that was going to school to be a religious scholar. And he met David in England, and David, taught him more in one or two settings than he had learned his years of studying at the seminary. So he moved to Waco to learn everything from David, because he just realized that this guy's actually teaching me what the scripture really says.
I believe he was another one that escaped the fire that day, or did he?
Well, no, he came out during the siege. And
I wasn't sure. I know he was there and he got out, but I wasn't sure if he got out that day or not.
He was the last of the adults that was sent out. And here's what's interesting about Livingston's story. I will preface his call with you guys, because his story is really out of this world. He went to jail for many years, and he refused to play ball with the system whatsoever. So Livingston was put into solitary confinement for the majority of his stay in prison, which I think was 7 or 8 years, before his sentence was overturned by the Supreme Court. And that's a whole story in itself. But this guy, because he wouldn't play ball, was in a cold cell. They took his blanket away. They put him in solitary for the majority of his stay in prison. So here's a guy that only had his experience and the Bible. That was his experience, was his only friend. And he was locked away in a dungeon like a dog. And the fact that he has come out of that and come through that and is able to talk like a rational human being absolutely blows my mind. I mean, what amazing strength Livingston has. And, you know, he definitely, he's a true believer, he's a true believer, but he also has an understanding of the scripture on a much deeper level than I ever will. And I don't talk about the scripture. I feel that my role in this is to tell my story and to connect with people. And if they want to know the scripture, that's either Livingston or that's other people in the group. That's for them. Livingston, that was his calling. That's not my calling. That was never my calling. My calling is as a witness. Livingston's calling, I think, is as someone who really understands scripture and David's message and to be able to try to impart that to people. So I'm really excited to hear that he's coming on the show. Wow, that's wonderful, man. Just get your thinking caps on, and I would have a Bible handy and a Strong's Concordance, because he's definitely going to go into some deep stuff for you.
Yeah, we're actually in discussions to do a 7-part series. Actually, we're going to do one show on each sign, so that's going to be really interesting.
Wow,
now,
wow, dude, my mind is blown right now at that. That is wow, dude. I am so excited to hear that. That's wow. Good for you guys.
Yeah, that's going to be...
No, really, that's phenomenal.
I'm really excited about it, but the details are in the works, so stay tuned for that, everybody. You know, it's a lot of material to cover, and I think it's very interesting, and just to at least get it on a record from a podcast standpoint, it should be on the record somewhere, I think.
Absolutely.
So we're going to do that. Jared, I feel like I have robbed you of any questions. I feel like I've been yapping my mouth off. Do you have any? Ask away, man. I'm going to turn it over to you for a little while.
I have plenty. You were just as excited as I was. There's no look at the brotherly love here, right? And all the respect. But I was wondering, and I know you have a book, so I don't want you to speak to anything that, to encourage people to buy the book. And I don't want you to repeat anything you don't want to. And plus, everyone has to acknowledge this is a very hard, this is war. This is a conflict of theological value system, you name it, everything. This is straight up civil war that you were in. And there has to be some acknowledgement right away of the stress factor, and just the fact that you're even willing to talk about it. I really appreciate it. So on that, I'm wondering if you want to talk at all about what were your roles and responsibilities during the siege.
There wasn't any. It was like, it's a 51-day siege. You don't know how long it's going to go on for, obviously, but every day becomes, how do you explain it, dude? It's,
well, do you want to talk at all about some of what you, what did you choose to take on? What were your roles?
We studied, we prayed, we spent a lot of time in our Bible, looking out the window and seeing the tanks go up and down, hearing the helicopters fly overhead, and then reading them and seeing with flaming torches they will attack the people of God, and seeing, we're watching the Bible come alive during the siege. That's the rub. That's the dimension that people outside didn't get and couldn't get. And that was the failure of my book. I tried to talk about it, but without talking about the scripture and seeing these events, then I'm hoping Livingston will be able to fill this in for your listeners, because it's fascinating. But to see the scriptures come alive and seeing a tank and then reading about something familiar to a tank in Nam attacking the people of God and saying, okay, there it is. Wow. So when they say, come on out, well, where the hell are you going to go? If you think that you're on the side of God, and God has written in this book through his prophets a plan for the end that has to do with the people going through a time of trouble such as never been, and they will have to go through this time of trouble before the rest of the world does, and you're seeing all these events take place from the scripture, where are you going to go? You going to go out to the Babylonian forces that you've come to believe are against God and against God's message? Hell no. So, when they said, when you said early on, were we able to leave? Yeah, absolutely. We could leave anytime we wanted. Most people did not want to leave because what would you be leaving? You would be leaving the Word of God and going out to the forces of the world, which are ultimately pride and arrogant, going to jail, going to whatever. Who knows? Your imagination runs wild when you're in that situation. But the point is, you believe that you're living the greatest story ever told. What side are you on? Well, is your life really that meaningful where your life's more important than being on the side of God? Yeah, many things go through the head, but that's how it feels. That's how it felt. That's why people didn't want to leave. That's why people stayed. It's that simple.
No, it's super interesting. And then, and specifically, did you change, or what was the ebb and flow of your personal philosophy during that period? Did it change depending on the incident during what was going on? What was going on for you? What were you doing during the gunfighting? Who specifically was doing the
gunfighting? Yeah, I took my cues from my Hollywood experience. And that is when you hear gunshots, you let the tourists look around to see where they're coming from, and you hid the hell under a car. So as soon as the first day they started shooting, I was on my face, and I went into the first room I could find, and that was the weight room. And I basically stayed there, crouched to the ground until the shooting was over. I think at one point I went down the hall and I saw Winston Blake's body in the room where he had lived, and the bullet holes had come through the water tank, and I saw the water pouring into the room. So yeah, but I stayed low at all times. I'm a lover, not a fighter, man. I want to go through life not taking another life. I very much believe in peace and love. I believe that we have to and there's a few people in life I've met that I just wish I had never met, but I don't hate them. I just don't understand them, and I don't like them, and I don't want them in my life, but I don't want to see them dead. You know what I mean? Listen, I just wish everyone could it's really simple. It's the golden rule, man. Treat people the way you want to be treated. So I get really upset when I see people that are being yelled at for being a color or being a race or being whatever. I've an affinity for the underdog. When I think of the American Indians, when I think of the Mayans, i.e. goes historically forever.
Yeah, the Irish. You're talking about the Irish.
I'm talking about them all, man. I'm talking about anyone that's had to live under the yoke of an oppressor. It's a horrible experience, slavery, all of it. And it's just, it is really as simple as just loving your fellow man treating them the way you wish to be treated. And if everyone did that, what could the world be? It sounds corny, but it's real. And yet we can't do it.
Well,
mankind just can't seem to do it.
I guess we're just about out of time, David. Jared, do you have another question you wanted to ask? I know I have one more, but it's kind of a wrap-up question.
Oh, okay. Well, so when it finally digressed to where it did, what exactly happened to you? Like when you finally make the decision, you're like, I think I might die, but I'm going to run out of here. Literally, can you take us through some of the step-by-step of how you were, from the time you came out of there to how you were treated? Like, a lot of people don't understand this, and it's a leading question, because what I want to get to is the part where I know people who are lawyers that are in the process of trying to reform the justice system, and a lot of people don't understand that you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, and the entire system makes you almost if you are a normal person and you get arrested, you will not be able to be found. You will not be able to locate. The justice system itself, the law enforcement people that we pay for, will make it impossible for you to even find out where your loved one is, to get a hold of them, to speak with them. And if you do, it's like $40, $30 a phone call. People do not understand how messed up our actual step-by-step system is. I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about it, or does it just suck?
I do, and it does just suck. And the other thing they don't understand is if you're a family member going in to see a loved one who's in jail, you're treated like dog meat. You're frowned upon, you're looked down upon, sometimes things will be said, but definitely they make it as hard as humanly possible for there to be any humanity in the process of the experience of jail, not even prison, just jail. So that is something that has been my mother had such a negative experience with that when I was in jail for that week, and she was trying to visit, and that just people were just very mean and cruel, and she could see it, and it has affected her. And I see it too. People are people. You are supposed to be treated. You are supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, but it's the opposite. People think if you're in jail for whatever reason, you probably deserve it, and you probably should be there. And they don't care what happens to you. And that's not. The truth is, people are in jail for many, many reasons. Some for absolutely ridiculous reasons. Some for just wanting to get high. And you're punishing people that are already in so much pain that they're looking to self-medicate. So how screwed up is that? Let's look at that for a second. You're in so much pain, you're going to a dealer to self-medicate, and then you're going to be criminalized and thrown in jail for it, and then treated like, instead of giving help to the person, we punish them and think that that's the solution. The whole thing is fundamentally wrong. It's just there definitely needs to be a lot of revampment here, and I think that's wonderful that you're working with people within the system who want to try to make it better, because that should have happened decades ago. And I'm sure there have been people, but what a hard fight that is. You're fighting. I believe. Listen. Not everyone believes the way I do. I believe you're fighting spiritual forces. I think these are real spiritual forces that can overtake people. And like when you think of mob mentality, the mob rules, I think it's a spiritual force that takes that mob over. When you get a few like-minded people that want to do violence or want to do whatever, there's another force. Once you have a few people thinking like-minded to do damage or destruction, there's a force that helps them with it. And it moves them in that direction very quickly. And I've seen it happen. I felt it. I've been in crowds and felt it happen and walked away because I did not want to participate in that kind of spiritual event. But I think that happens all the time personally. Yes, I do.
Well, what was it like for you, though, is there anything that stands out for you during your incarceration or that process? I mean, how difficult? I don't mean how you felt. I mean, literally, I think people need to hear how possibly difficult the mechanics of communication and the mechanics of the threats and the direct insults or innuendos of how incarceration works. I mean, I don't want to just hear that. I want to just hear your experience.
Well, my experience is, I had it really easy, frankly. I was left alone. I was held as a material witness for a week. I wasn't even in a cell with anyone. They put someone like Louis Alanese in the cell with me for about 10 minutes to ask me questions. It was pretty obvious that he was a plant, but I was very honest with him. He said, who started the fire? I said, we didn't start the fire. I have no idea who started the fire. I was, that was it. That was the only experience I had. The worst experience I had, actually, let me go back, was before I got to jail. And that was the processing, because they put me in a tank and they took me to a tent, checkpoint 1, if you will. And that tent was filled with ATF guys. The ATF guys took me, and they said, okay, we're taking you to this tent with the ATF. I go, you're taking me to the ATF? I said, you're going to hand me over to the ATF? Are you serious? They were serious. And they did. And the ATF made me take off all my clothes. And they videotaped my naked body. And then they gave me the orange jumpsuit and took me into another van to take me to the second checkpoint for processing. And I think that's where they took my thumbprints. I can't remember that part of it because I think I was pretty much in shock at that point. But they took my prints and my palm prints. Everything. Every finger was printed. My palm was printed. And then they took me to the county jail. So, and no one really said it. One guy said, when I was naked, he said, "Oh, so you used to be fat, huh?" Because I had some sagging skin. Because I've always been a big guy. In high school, I was 250. I just always been a big guy. Just like that's who I am. And I lost a lot of weight during the siege, being on what I call the Mount Carmel 51-day diet plan, which is 2 MREs a day and 2 16-ounce ladles of water. You tend to lose quite a bit of weight. So I was thin for the first and only time in my life. And that was the only comment that stood out. The guy didn't even say it insensibly. It was just kind of a fact. But it's just the fact that we're videotaping my naked body I found very disturbing. But, that was it. It could have been a lot worse. And I just think everyone was it was that last day. And I think because everyone was in shock with the outcome, I don't even think that most of the agents on the ground expected that. But we didn't expect that, so.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, David, before we wrap it up. Are you surprised that the federal government was able to use Vice to spread propaganda in this manner? And not only were you surprised, but what would you say to Vice if they were listening to this right now?
I got to think on that question because I've always liked Vice. I've always appreciated that they're taking chances that other journalists either can't or won't take. And that's through their inception. I've been following Vice for many years now. I understand that that I don't even politically I don't know. I just like the fact that they're reaching that generation and they have a different perspective. They're giving their generation a different perspective than my generation had, if you will. And so frankly, I don't know. I'm a little. I think I have to process that question a bit because I'm very let down by it. I'm very let down that they're falling for that kind of extreme propaganda on one side without getting the other. I really am. I really expected more. I mean, you're talking to I'm a fan. I really respect and like what they've done, and it's a little hard. I really expected them to be a little more open, but I think it also shows the power of the government. It shows the power. Most journalistic media types, they want to work with the government because that's where they get their stories. You know what I mean? I mean, how many great stories are they going to get by having contacts in the FBI over the course of a career?
Yeah,
quite a few, right? More than they're going to get from Dave Thibodeau. So, if you're looking at it from a business perspective, okay, that's probably wise. And I know that there's going to be some blowback from the series. So I think the government waited its appropriate time, and now I think we're going to see a lot from the other side come out. But I just don't know how it's going to go because it just appears that they've tried so hard to rewrite history and they haven't been successful. I think that more people are aware of Waco and what really happened there than ever before. And I don't think it's going to go away that easily.
Yeah, well, that's the truth. Well, man, I just want to play drums, man. Yeah, I hear you. Hey, you got a big anniversary coming up. Today's April 1st. What do you got going on? Are you going down to Waco? What do you got in your plans the next few weeks?
Well, I'm going to do a few interviews with various podcasts and people that one of the things that I've really enjoyed is I've been working with some high school teachers, and I've been doing some Zoom classes for some high school, just a few, but I like being able to reach kids that think about this last year. Think about being the senior class of 2020. How crappy was that experience? It's COVID. All your classes are from Zoom. There's no prom. You don't get to hang out with your friend. I mean, can you imagine? I couldn't imagine being in high school as a senior and having to go through what these poor kids this last 2 years of COVID have had to go through. And so a lot of teachers have asked that they're trying to reach these kids through Zoom any way they can, and it's hard because of the way COVID has affected education. So a few people have reached out, and I get to talk to their classes, and I got to tell you, to me, it's the biggest honors to be able to talk to kids and just say that I'm an old fogey, but I remember when I was your age, and I so feel for everything that all these kids today have had to go through. Imagine not having a senior year, senior prom because of COVID. It's unprecedented, and it's not like American education is taking the forefront of the world to begin with. You know, there's a lot of problems in American education. It's like I just all the challenges now these kids have is just I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's just
yeah.
It's just such an honor to be able to talk to kids on that level. I love it, and I wish I could do it more. Actually, I think it's quite
awesome, man.
It's amazing.
I hope I hope you've been able to face your demons, man, and I hope you get some sense of peace. You know, I really do, man. Thanks a lot for coming on the show.
I don't think so, though. Yeah. Thank you, by the way, and I do appreciate that. But no, the anger's always there, and I'm starting to resent it. Frankly, I've never wanted to take medication. I've always wanted to take my experience and go through it. But I'm at the point where I kind of, I don't know. It might be nice just to take a pill and not feel anything, and just be, zombified. I don't know. I'm getting to that point where it's just, without justice. It's just without justice. Our whole system is supposed to be based on justice, and if it eludes you for this many years, it's going to affect you, man. I don't know.
Yeah, stay away from the pills, man. Go smoke a J.
I don't do anything. Honestly, I'm joking when I say that that's a fantasy, because I actually do want to feel, and I don't want my experience to be anesthetized in any way. I went through a period of that, the drugs and alcohol, where I was just escaping. And, I just can't do that anymore. I have to take it. But there are days where it's much harder than others. That's all. I'll leave it at that. There's just days where, spilling my coffee can set me off, and I just don't like that. It's just not the person I want to be.
Jared, you got anything else to say before we wrap up?
Yeah, let's go into, as far as the ups and downs of it, where are you at now? Overall, are you happy? Are you working on things that you love? What are you up to lately?
Well, am I happy?
You said you were a seeker, so that's a never-ending passion.
It is never-ending. The reading is never-ending, and the problem is the more you learn, it's like, the conclusions don't seem to come. It's the more questions you ask and answer, the more questions there are. But that's fun. That's, like I always say, it's not, the quest for the Holy Grail is not in finding the Grail. It's the seeking the Grail. It's the journey that is the experience that is treasured in the heavens, and not the actual finding of the Grail. So, you just got to keep that in mind through it all. Things are great. I live relatively comfortably. The government hasn't come and killed me yet. They haven't thrown me in jail yet. And there are people that are living and suffering all over the world. And when I want to complain, I think about them, and I just say, I am just incredibly lucky to have come through what I have, and to be here to tell the story. And, there's times where you get anxiety from it, because it's like, I don't want to speak against my government 24/7, but I just tell my story. I want to trust and love my government. I just don't. I just can't. They just lie to you, man. They're just liars. It sucks, but that's life. That's what it is. So
Yeah,
anyway,
Cookie
I
Therapy
guess
says,
at least I have a purpose, you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Could be worse.
Cookie Therapy says, eat green veggies and take a walk in the woods.
That's a good one. I eat a lot of green veggies, but the walking thing, I got to work on that.
David, what's your website? Why don't you the link will be in the description box below for everybody, but why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, that's wacosurvivors.com. And I got a ton of great information on there. I mean, we got the FBI, and I don't edit anything. I try to put everything on there in its entirety. So if you want to read the FBI negotiation transcripts, I think we have all 51 days there. What was said is what was said. I have not edited anything. Stuart Wright's writings. Stuart Wright is a professor in Beaumont, Texas. Has written many critical analyses of the FBI. His stuff is amazing. It will literally blow you away. I highly recommend reading Stuart's stuff. We're getting ready to have a memorial, the 28th year memorial. That's going to be online. It's going to be strictly, you have to send us an email, and then we will email you the Zoom link because we don't want any Zoom bombing or anything like that. So that's something that'll be, thanks for letting, I got to make that available on the site. Right now it's just social media, Facebook to get that link, but I'll work on that. I'll get that on the site so, your people can go to Waco Survivors and be able to get the invite to the memorial this year.
All right.
And, we're just going to be talking about things for an hour. And then we have a slideshow presentation of all those who have died. And we try to tell a brief little story about each individual as we show their pictures. So that's, always a very special thing is to be able to focus on the people that were lost, who they were, and, just honor them. And that's what the memorials were all about.
All right. Jared, why don't you tell everybody, David, don't hang up, don't go anywhere yet, all right?
You got it, man.
All right, stick around until after the show, and Jared and I want to talk to you a little bit. Jared,
Sure.
why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
Hey guys, go to notaliens.com and right now do me a huge favor, and if you want to subscribe to my YouTube channel, great, that's Not Aliens also. But for notaliens.com, we will be Conflict and Dark Hour Paranormal. We are going to be at America's Stonehenge May 1st. I will be doing a live lecture, not just about America's Stonehenge, but for 3 hours. If you want to, for $29.95, you can go to Not Aliens and buy a ticket. You'll get to be a part of the Zoom show, or you can show up. And I will actually, that'll give you 6 months membership on notaliens.com. But also, I will have a $10 ticket soon. So if you just want to listen in on virtual, there will be a $10 ticket. It'll help with the trip. And we will be following up the lecture May 1st live at New Hampshire's, Salem, New Hampshire's America's Stonehenge with a outside tour. It's about a 110-acre site. We're going to be there May 1st. This weekend, I am the keynote speaker for Forbidden Knowledge News virtual conference that starts tomorrow night. Well, it starts, you can buy tickets. It starts tomorrow. There's many speakers. I'm the keynote tomorrow at 7. And then I'll be doing a group conference on Saturday at noon Central. And that's this weekend. But then May 1st is the lecture at America's Stonehenge. And that's about it for now.
All right, awesome. Remember, you can always find us online. Just go to www.conflictradio.net. You can also find us on Apple iTunes, Spreaker, YouTube, and all of your normal podcast catchers. Until next time, batten down the hatches and be safe.